What is extremely rare, but people think it's very common? Tourette's with corporalalia, involuntary swearing. Only about 10% of Tourette's patients have this symptom. Because of this misconception, I would also say that having Tourette's is more common than you think. 1 in every 160 children between 5 and 17, or 1 in 100 children if including all tic disorders, according to Tourette's Association of America. Successfully saving someone trapped by a fire via re-entering a burning building. The mortality rate for this is really high, and fire departments have petitioned to stop showing this in movies because it usually results in another life being lost. I had a kitchen fire when I was a teenager, and after some moderate panicking trying to pull it out with the sink, my mom and sister went outside and called the fire department. And I was like, oh yeah, there's an outside, and went and got the hose and put the fire out. The firefighters showed up and were like, you put out the fire? Nice job, dude. But never go back inside, ever. But nice job putting out that fire. Not even once, do you understand me? It was a little weird. I didn't really know how to feel about it at the time because it makes sense, safety being more important than damaged property. But in this particular instance, I never felt like I was in danger. But presumably other people who went back into burning buildings also felt like they weren't going to die. But they did. Even when the fire hasn't grown too big and isn't dangerous to you, it can produce a lot of smoke, and that's the crap that will get you in a confined space. Also, if you spend significant time in the building or have to go in far from an exit, the fire can spread to block the path you came in by. I know it's dangerous, but I'm sorry. If my partner or pups are in a burning building, good luck convincing me to stay outside if I think there's even a chance I can help them. Burglary in the middle of the night. Burglary happens most often during the day, when nobody is home. No burglar wants to break in and try and sneak around your place while you're sleeping. His biggest concern is to evade detection. It makes more sense to work in the daytime. In all likelihood, that noise you heard outside was a car or raccoon or your imagination. Go to sleep. Edit. Gold? Thanks, but I was gonna break in and steal all your gold anyway. That's exactly what a burglar would say. Don't trust this person. They will, however, not hesitate to break into or steal your car. Source: too many times to count in multiple neighborhoods in multiple cities, unfortunately. People giving away drugs to kids at Halloween. Why would they give away product they could sell? My 12-year-old daughter told me that literally none of the kids in her grade will eat from the pizza place right by our house because the people making the pizza put weed in it. I figure 12 is old enough to learn that nobody is giving away weed. That crap ain't free. Where is this pizza place I should most certainly avoid because of the weed in the pizza? Yes, do let us know. We all need to know where to avoid. You almost never see two guys walking across the street carrying a big pane of glass. I was on a college visit once, and I saw two guys walking holding a big pane of glass. I took a good look because I know it will never happen again. I once slipped on a banana peel. I took a moment to really absorb it because I couldn't believe it had actually just happened. Dropping out of college and becoming a millionaire/billionaire. Most of those people drop out of Harvard, MIT, Oxford, and Cambridge at all. They don't drop out of community college. Survivor's bias. And they don't drop out because they couldn't hack it. They drop out because it's a waste of time for them. Edit. Fork it. It stays. Red hair. It only occurs in about 2% of the population. Hello, ladies. Ever been with a man covered in burns he got from a cloudy day? Dissociative identity disorder. Multiple personalities. What is common, on the other hand, is the mistaken belief that this is synonymous with schizophrenia, as well as most misconceptions about all mental illnesses and disorders. My favorite to point out is the difference between OCD and OCPD to people who constantly talk about how OCD they are because they like their closet organized in a reasonable way. A potential mate who is successful, smart, funny, attractive, mentally stable, ready for commitment, and single, and attracted to you, and willing to settle for you. Yeah, sorry to say, viewers, but I am taken. Becoming a successful YouTuber. My coworker told me he was quitting his job to focus on his video gaming and streaming. I just wished him a hearty good luck. Please give us an update in a few months. Rent-controlled apartments in New York City. If TV is accurate, they're all occupied by part-time coffee shop employees who work approximately 10 minutes a day, writing code that executes on first compile. Well, in my experience, it almost always executes, but it rarely works. Runtime is the real B. My code would work perfectly if it weren't for people wanting to actually run it. Being able to make it as a musician or actor or many other creative jobs. And by making it, I mean being able to earn some serious money or even just make a living by just performing and not doing anything else. Most of the time, you will have to have multiple side projects that only roughly are related to actually performing. Or so I've heard. If there are people with personal experience in these fields, I'd love to read your comments. I have a friend that's an amazing songwriter. He has written with and for many famous bands and artists. Lots of people you've heard on the radio. He has been nominated for a Grammy twice, once in the last year or two. He has to work side jobs to make ends meet in between royalty checks. There is just no money in music anymore unless you are Taylor Swift or Lady Gaga. Even someone like him? That proves my point more than I would have thought. Thanks for sharing. As a creative who does make a living doing my creative stuff, let me tell y'all, it took a lot of work. For years, I recorded audiobooks, small parts, or whatever I could get, and that money was never even close to enough to keep me from also having to work day jobs. I would work 40 hours a week and then another 20 to 30 hours a week just auditioning and recording for books that, when all was said and done, barely paid more than minimum wage. I did that for probably 6 years before I was able to actually make a living just doing voice and other acting work. It's rare you can just fall into creative jobs. You have to work your butt off most of the time, but I'm glad I did. Broadband internet in rural areas of U.S. There are only 13 advertising blimps in use around the world, yet it's so common to see them when there's a football game. Edit. For those asking for a source, under use. There's also a blog post by one of the companies that owns a lot of these blimps, Van Wagner Airship, that says so. Is there more than one Goodyear blimp? Because I've seen that thing several times throughout my life, all throughout the country. Successfully resuscitating someone who has drowned. Edit. For clarification, drowned is the key word. A man died from submersion in water. Has opened a great discussion with me on this, and this chart is very telling on the different success rates based on drowned versus drowning. Edit. At request. If your heart stops, there is a 1 in 20 chance you will survive with CPR. An AED doubles your chances, but that's only 1 in 10. 90 to 95% of hearts that stop do not restart. The movies tell me all I have to do is scream at them to wake up, and it works. Don't forget to pound on their chest. Actually, I learned in nurse's assistant training that pounding on the chest is I think like a really clumsy defibrillator or something. It's been like 15 years. So it can be useful, but not usually. If the BBC has taught me anything, it would be murders in small British villages. My mom watched a show about two gardeners, Rosemary and Thyme, who traveled about gardening and going to flower shows, and there was always a murder they solved. And they'd always know more than the police. B, if two gardeners keep showing up around murders, they're the prime suspects. American here. Rosemary and Thyme was so over the top and ridiculous. When it was on Netflix, my friends and I would have viewing parties. What could be more British than two sassy ladies roaming around the UK, restoring gardens and solving murders? Epilepsy being fall to the floor, spaz uncontrollably, froth and all that due to flashing lights. Epilepsy is recurring seizures, and there are lots and lots of seizure types, and often they aren't noticeable, even immediately so for the sufferer. Triggers for these seizures are more likely to be hyperventilation, stress, alcohol or sleep deprivation, or stuff like that, than strobe lights. Epilepsy is also pretty common, and it's likely you go to school or work with someone who has it in a reverse of the title. Ironically for this post, though, the kind of epilepsy I have does have the stereotype. My dad has severe epilepsy, and I've seen him have seizures. Once we were at the movies, go out to the movie, and the sudden brightness of daylight overloaded his senses and was too much. He froze in place with a 1,000-yard stare on his face and dropped his expensive camera. We were on vacation. And I knew what was happening. I sat him down on a bench, and in a few minutes he was okay, but tired and confused. I used to have seizures when I was younger. I remember the second time I had it, it was on the highway, which was effing brutal. I was just looking outside my window and saw a bunch of flashing images, which was effing odd to see. Then it hit me that I was about to have my second seizure. It's actually a weird feeling once you have a seizure. I remember that I was kind of unaware of my surroundings when it was happening, and wasn't really paying attention to how my family reacted. Then after my seizure went away, I was kind of confused and had difficulty answering basic questions to the medics like, what is your name or when is your birthday? Instead of instant responses, it took me an extra 15 to 30 seconds to try and figure out how to answer these simple questions, which is odd. Thankfully, I've outgrown my seizures and haven't had one in 7 years. I used to work with a client who would have seizures, just suddenly stiffen up in place, muscles tight, and myself and other workers would gather around him to keep him from falling or anything when he came to, as he would be confused and extremely exhausted because of the muscle tightening, I imagine. Pleading insanity to escape punishment for a crime. There was even a pretty so-so movie about it a while ago. In reality, it is very rare that insanity is used as a criminal defense strategy. Fewer than 1% of criminal cases in the U.S. involve the insanity defense. Here's a PDF source for your perusal if you're not the type to trust some guy on the internet. Even then, it is only successful in 1 out of 4 attempts, and that involves convincing a psychiatrist that you're insane. So don't hang your hat on it if you're thinking about killing someone. Also, pleading insanity doesn't get you off scot-free. It means you get placed in a psychiatric facility for an indefinite amount of time until your doctors are satisfied that you are able to manage your condition without harming yourself or others. For many people, that can mean they never get out. For others, it means only a couple of years of therapy and finding the right medication. And most are released under conditions such as remaining in outpatient care, living with a caregiver, etc. ETA. Yes, it's supposed to be scot-free. When not guilty is a life sentence. It's long, so here's a podcast version. If you are found to be guilty of murder and are sane, you could spend 25 years in prison. But if you are found not guilty by reason of insanity, you could be confined to an institution for 587 years. Involuntary confinement in a state psychiatric hospital sometimes becomes a life sentence. Meteorologists getting the forecast wrong. People only notice when it happens and ignore the other dozens of days that are right on or at least very close. Having green eyes. Only 1 to 2% of humans on Earth have green eyes. Been in Turkey many years ago, never seen so many people with black as the night hair and green emerald eyes. 1 to 2% means 70 to 140 million people. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. A woman's water breaking during pregnancy. It only happens outside of the hospital like 15% of the time, but in the movies it's always the dramatic telling of when a baby is coming. Wow, I did not know this. When my baby was born, they had to manually break the waters. That was like 6 hours after getting to the hospital and about 20 hours after the first mild contractions. Edit. Clarification. I'm the husband in this scenario. Yep, as a guy, I did not know this at all, and believe me, I paid attention in health education classes, dang it. I mean, I probably did. Big D's. At work right now, so I'm not Googling the stats, but if you've ever had the pleasure of perusing through the Craigslist personals, you should, it's gold. There are a ton of women wanting a guy with at least a 9-inch schlong. 9 inches must be larger than 90% of adult film stars. That's your bottom limit? You have no idea how rare a D over 9 inches long is. 2 former coworkers, women, once claimed that they believed 8 inches was the average D size. They are setting themselves up for a life of disappointment. It's okay. All the average guys are going to call themselves 8 inches to them anyway. Hitting a jackpot. That's why casinos exist and are hugely profitable. Hell, late last year in my city, a woman won $1.2 million just on a VLT at a local bar. Great for her, but you know it led to an increase in people burning through their paychecks on those machines. The epitome of this logic for me was in 2015 when some genius came up with the idea of making the Powerball harder to win because it would result in much larger jackpots. Granted, your odds became even more abysmal, but look at that giant number on the billboard, and someone's gotta win, right? And that was a resounding success, if I remember correctly. Cow tipping. Everyone knows some kid who claims to have gone out in the countryside and pushed a cow over for a laugh. Know how many people have actually tipped a cow? None. It's a bloody great big beast, and it isn't going to let you shunt it. With the amount of cow tipping stories that exist, you should think there'd be more video evidence of it occurring. But it's just a lie city kids tell their mates. Look, I don't know how you folks over in the UK do things, but here in America, we always tip our cows. They provide a great service, and I make sure to tip them at least 20% for all that delicious milk. This joke is dumb. And I'm lactose intolerant and hate milk, so it's extra inaccurate. Quicksand, using stop, drop, and roll. Exactly, but when you were in grade school, the amount of times that you had a fire safety demonstration that brought this up, you'd think catching on fire was like a normal thing. If only that idiot with the skateboard who soaked his pants in gasoline and then lit them on fire hadn't missed those 25 separate demonstrations in grade school. Wasabi. You can only really find the real stuff in Japan, and even there, it's really rare. Edit. The stuff you eat here is just colored horseradish. I had a friend who thought wasabi was just the Japanese word for horseradish. The Japanese word for horseradish is seiyo wasabi, or Western wasabi. Shark attacks. I live in Perth, supposedly one of the shark attack capitals of the world. Sure, we see them occasionally, but actual attacks are very rare. I live in the other Perth, and shark attacks are even rarer. Which other Perth? There are 9 places named Perth in America. There are 2 places named Perth in Canada. There are 2 places named Perth in Australia. There's 1 place named Perth in South Africa. There's 1 place named Perth in Jamaica. There's 1 place named Perth in Guyana. There's 1 place named Perth in United Kingdom. I guess an opposite to this thread's question, what's one thing that's really common but people think is rare? Perth. Being in an airplane crash. It's 1 in a million, but a lot of people I know are still more scared to travel on a plane than in a car. Australian here. Know a guy so petrified of flying he elected to drive from the northernmost point of Australia to the southernmost point, then drives his car onto a boat which shipped them to Tasmania, then all the way back again. All told, this was about a 10,000-kilometer trip. They had other stops up the east coast. I'm not an expert, but I figure weighing up the 10,000 kilometers through outback Australia combined with major city CBDs on the way to the destination, and the risk of death or serious injury I can only imagine would be much, much higher than just flying for a few hours. Wow, I'd say death of boredom is greatly increased as well. I used to make the trip from Victoria to Queensland by car every year, and going through country NSW has to be the most boring thing I have ever done. ROSC, Return of Spontaneous Circulation After CPR. I believe the actual success rate is 3%, and those people are very likely to have brain damage. Media would have you think it's a great catch-all for any unconscious person. Here's the thing though, a lot of times the CPR isn't what gets them circulating on their own again. What it does, however, is maintain blood flow so that by the time they get the treatment that will get them pumping again, they are less likely to have brain damage. Yes, the success rate is low, even lower if it's performed poorly, but even 3% is better than 0%. The MBTA cop that got shot in the gunfight with the Boston bombers supposedly went through a ton of blood as EMTs kept him on IV and constant CPR till they got him to the hospital. Somehow he woke up with remarkably little issues besides some nerve damage in his leg and total memory loss from that night. I never heard if he had any lingering effects though. I'm gonna go with T-Rex fossils. I at least thought they were rather common since my local museum had like 3. There are something like only 4 dozen ever found in the world and only about 12 skulls. Edit. Guess it is about 50 was going on memory. Still a bit low if you ask me considering how much we talk about dinos. Edit 2. Since everyone keeps thinking they are replicas/casts, it is the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles, which has at least 3 T-Rex. When I was little, I also didn't realize how lucky I was to have such a huge and wonderful museum nearby. Now we have the Endeavor right next to it. Interesting. It always seemed like there was a good amount discovered. Well, I mean, on an archaeological level, a dozen complete skeletons is quite a lot. Amusement ride incidents. You are more safe on the ride than driving to the park itself. The vast majority of incidents that occur are because of ride misconduct. Follow the rules, trust the operators, and you'll be fine. Edit. I don't know how to use case in point, LOL. Edit 2. A lot of people are asking about carnival rides, and I'd like to differentiate them from permanent amusement rides. While carnival rides are built and inspected to certain standards, the temporary nature of the rides puts them in a separate league from permanent amusement rides. Former Carney here, this is absolutely only true for parks that stay in one place. Our rides broke down all the time, LOL. Like at least once a weekend. Granted, the only time anyone actually got hurt on my watch was my damn self as I tried to grab one of the teacups, ours were shaped like bears, to give it a good speedy spin to hopefully impress some girls, and I ended up just getting knocked on my butt. But things stalling in midair was pretty common. At one point our zipper, think Ferris wheel but much faster and the cabins do flips, broke and someone puked and it hit someone below them. All of our rides were used ones bought from other parks or shows. Some had even been built in the 50s. If I had kids, I would not let them on the rides I used to build and operate every week. LOL. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.